Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Sasha never truly believed that the wounds left behind by Brando's death and the loss of their unborn son would ever fully heal. The pain was carved too deep, the grief too consuming, the memories too cruel to simply fade. But she survived, not because the sorrow had lessened, but because she had no choice. She kept breathing, kept walking, kept facing each day, because of Daisy. That tiny little girl with Brando's eyes and Sasha's resilience had become the one light in a life otherwise cloaked in shadows. Daisy was her reason, her tether, her hope. Since the moment Daisy was born, Sasha deliberately distanced herself from the chaos of Port Charles, trading drama and noise for silence and stability. She lived quietly, cautiously, seeking to shelter her daughter from the kind of destruction that had ravaged her own soul. But Port Charles was never a place where the broken could remain untouched. Peace, however fleeting, was always on borrowed time. The signs came subtly at first, almost whisper-like in their intrusion. A strange car parked across the street 3 days in a row. A woman with her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat loitering near the park where Sasha walked Daisy each morning. The doorbell ringing at midnight, yet no one on the porch. Sasha told herself she was overreacting, that this was just the overprotective instinct of a traumatized mother trying to guard the only thing that still mattered. She dismissed the goosebumps as paranoia and the unease as leftover fear. But all those warnings came crashing into a brutal reality one morning when she woke to silence, not the peaceful stillness of sleep, but the oppressive void of absence. The nursery door was open. The crib was empty. And Daisy's favorite blanket lay crumpled on the floor like a discarded promise. A scream ripped from Sasha's throat as panic consumed her. She tore through the house, opening every door, searching for some logical explanation, a friend stopping by, a neighbor playing a sick joke. But the truth settled in like a stone in her gut: Daisy was gone. Her hands trembling, she called the police, then Sonny, then anyone whose number she could remember through the blinding haze of terror. But nothing could have prepared her for the message that arrived moments later, a video file, sent anonymously. And when she opened it, her world split apart. There, on the screen, was Gladys. Once family. Once trusted. Once forgiven. Now, monstrous. Gladys looked deranged, her eyes wild with delusion, her hair disheveled, and her arms wrapped tightly around Daisy's tiny body. Behind her was a dim, unfamiliar room, possibly abandoned, possibly dangerous. And her voice trembled with both venom and desperation. She claimed she had been betrayed, forgotten, cast aside by those who owed her. She said she'd sacrificed everything for her family, and now it was time they paid her back. Daisy, she snarled, was the key. The child of Sasha and Brando, blood of the Quartermains, the Corinthos, the Corbins, was her ticket to the life she always believed she deserved. She demanded a ransom so obscenely large it bordered on fantasy and warned Sasha that if she didn't comply, she would never see her daughter alive again. Sasha collapsed to the ground, the blanket still clutched in her hands, her body shuddering in silent sobs. Her mind couldn't process it, not the betrayal, not the danger, not the sheer insanity of it all. She had forgiven Gladys once. She had trusted her, let her into Daisy's life, allowed the past to stay in the past. But now the past had come roaring back with claws and teeth, and it had taken her child. And then, through the fog of horror and despair, Sonny appeared. He didn't need to ask what had happened. One look at Sasha, pale, shaking, hollow, and he knew. The video was enough. The threat was real. And the time for mercy had ended. Sonny had once exiled Gladys from Port Charles, sent her away in disgrace after discovering her betrayal with Dr. Montague. But clearly, she had returned, and clearly, she had learned nothing. She had gone beyond scheming and gambling, now she had endangered a child, his family. A Corinthos. An innocent. Sonny didn't rage. He didn't shout. He simply nodded once and left, moving with the kind of deadly silence that meant only one thing: he would fix this, and there would be no second chances. Not this time. The trail wasn't hard to follow. Sonny's men were already combing through surveillance, tracing burner phone signals, scanning abandoned properties. It didn't take long before they found the place, an old hunting cabin on the outskirts of town, a place so forgotten it wasn't even on most maps. Sonny went alone. He didn't want interference. Didn't want police, or questions, or anyone slowing him down. This wasn't about justice. This was about survival. When he arrived, he saw the lights flickering through broken windows. Heard the muffled cries of a baby. And then he heard Gladys, ranting, raving, her voice cracking as she repeated the same twisted monologue from the video. She didn't even notice the door creak open. Didn't hear Sonny's footsteps until he was standing behind her. When she finally turned, still clutching Daisy, Sonny looked into her eyes, and he didn't see family. He saw a threat. A mistake. A betrayal so unforgivable that the only option left was finality. He told her to put the child down. She refused. He warned her once more. She laughed, the sound unhinged and sharp. And then Sonny drew his gun, and without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Gladys fell. It was quick. Quiet. Clean. The only sound after was Daisy's cry, not of fear, but of relief, as Sonny gently picked her up and held her close. When Sasha arrived minutes later, she ran into the cabin, heart in her throat, and saw Sonny standing over the body of the woman who had once been her mother-in-law. Daisy was safe. Alive. Unharmed. Sasha dropped to her knees, scooping her daughter into her arms, sobbing into her hair, her entire body shaking from the storm that had just passed. Sonny didn't say a word. He placed a hand on Sasha's shoulder, then turned and walked away into the night, carrying the weight of what he'd done without hesitation or regret. Because he had done what had to be done. He had protected his family. He had saved Daisy. And in a world where monsters wore familiar faces and forgiveness became a weapon, sometimes the only answer left was fire and blood. Sonny acted without delay, the weight of what was at stake eclipsing any hesitation that might have otherwise crept in. The moment he watched that sickening video, the one where Gladys snarled threats while cradling an innocent child, he knew he wouldn't waste a second on negotiation or mercy. This was no longer a family matter. This was war. A direct assault on his blood, and Sonny Corinthos did not let that go unanswered. With deadly precision, he traced the GPS data embedded in the video's metadata, coordinating with his most trusted associates, men who didn't ask questions, who understood the gravity of protecting family. They moved swiftly and silently through the night, away from the lights and ears of law enforcement, guided only by purpose and fury. The target. An abandoned property in the outskirts of Port Charles, a crumbling house scorched by a forest fire years prior and left to rot like the ghosts that now seemed to haunt it. The approach was calculated. There were no flashing sirens, no battering rams, no barking orders from police megaphones. There was only silence, sharp and unnatural, as if the night itself held its breath. The structure stood like a skeleton, brittle and hollow, the outer walls blackened with soot, the windows cracked like jagged glass fangs. Inside, there was no light save for the flicker of a dying candle and the blue pulse of a baby monitor sitting askew on a mildewed counter. Sonny's boots touched the warped floorboards with soundless resolve, his hand already resting on the grip of his pistol. The men behind him knew their roles, fanning out with ghost-like stealth. This was not a rescue. This was an extraction, and potentially, an execution. Then it happened. A piercing scream shattered the silence, Gladys, shrieking like a cornered animal, her voice bouncing off the peeling walls with manic desperation. She emerged from the shadows holding Daisy in a vice-like grip, the child crying in confusion and terror. Her eyes bulged with wild fury, lips curled into a grimace of both rage and panic. She waved a small, rusted blade in one trembling hand, threatening to kill the baby if anyone dared take a step forward. The words tumbled out of her mouth in a frenzy, accusations, curses, self-pitying justifications about what the world owed her. She looked like a woman broken long ago, now clinging to the one leverage she thought would make her powerful again. But Sonny was unmoved. His eyes locked on hers with a terrifying stillness, no fear, no rage, no empathy. Only inevitability. He had seen this before, the descent of a person who crossed the line and never looked back. He had dealt with worse. But this was different. This wasn't about business, or territory, or retribution. This was about a baby. His niece. His blood. And nothing, would keep him from protecting her. He took one slow step forward. Gladys shrieked louder, the blade moving dangerously close to Daisy's neck. Sonny did not flinch. He didn't blink. His hand moved, fluid and silent, the pistol rising in perfect sync with his breath. The world seemed to stop. Time folded into itself. In that moment, there were no choices left. One shot rang out. A flash of light. A puff of smoke. And Gladys dropped. The bullet found its mark with unerring precision, embedding itself in her chest, just left of center. Her body jerked, staggered, and fell with a sickening thud onto the splintered wooden floor. Her arms went limp, her hand released the knife, her eyes wide open, still glassy with delusion even in death. Blood spread quickly beneath her, soaking into the rotted floorboards like dark ink, and the room went still again, save for the soft cries of Daisy now echoing louder than any scream before. Sonny moved immediately, gently prying Daisy from the chaos and wrapping her in the safety of his arms. Her tiny body trembled against his chest, her sobs quieting as if she recognized that the man holding her was not a stranger, but a guardian. He checked her quickly. No wounds, no visible harm, only fear, the kind that would take much longer to heal. He held her tighter. By the time Sasha arrived, the nightmare had already ended, though its echoes would haunt her forever. She burst through the door like a tidal wave of panic, eyes searching for the only thing that mattered. And there, in the arms of Sonny, was Daisy, alive. Sasha collapsed to the floor, overcome by the intensity of everything she had endured, the hours of dread, the image of Gladys as a kidnapper, the sound of a gunshot she hadn't heard but somehow felt in her bones. Her arms reached for her daughter, and Sonny gently passed the child into them, his face expressionless, his hands stained with the blood of a woman who once claimed to be family. Sasha clung to Daisy, rocking her gently, whispering through tears that it was over, that she was safe, though she could barely believe it herself. She looked up and saw Sonny, not the feared mob boss, not the powerful man of Port Charles, but something else entirely. He stood like a ghost made flesh, his silence saying more than any words ever could. There was no pride in his posture, no triumph in his gaze. He had done what needed to be done, not for glory, not for gratitude, but because he had no other choice. Because no one else would cross that line. Because the moment Daisy was taken, the past didn't matter, only survival did. And in Sonny's world, survival meant sacrifice. No news story would capture what really happened in that cabin. No police report would tell of the madness in Gladys's eyes, or the quiet anguish in Sonny's. No one would know how close Daisy had come to being a name on a headstone beside Brando's. But Sasha knew. And she would carry that knowledge like a scar. Sonny had taken a life twisted by greed and madness, to save another. And though the world might never understand, Sasha would never forget. Because in the darkest moment of her life, Sonny didn't hesitate. He stepped into the shadows. And brought her daughter home. In the days that followed, a heavy silence blanketed Port Charles, disturbed only by the quiet whispers of speculation that traveled through hospital corridors, coffee shops, and back alleys. News of the shooting began to ripple through the town, each version of the story growing more distorted as it passed from one mouth to another. But the authorities remained tight-lipped, issuing no official statement, offering no confirmation, only reiterating that the investigation was ongoing. Yet behind the veil of public silence, those who mattered, those who knew the tangled web of loss and betrayal that had led to that single shot, understood the truth in all its brutal clarity. They knew Sonny had done what no one else could do. They knew Gladys was gone. And they knew why. For Sasha, the aftermath unfolded not as a wave of relief but as a strange, hollow quiet. She withdrew from the world almost entirely, cutting herself off from the press, from friends, from those who wanted a quote, a statement, an interview. Photographers waited outside her gate. Journalists left cards and voicemails begging for her side of the story. But Sasha remained unreachable. She had no words left. There was no victory speech. No grand declaration of survival. Only her and Daisy, locked in a tender, fragile cocoon. She spent every hour of every day by her daughter's side. Holding her close, rocking her gently, whispering songs that trembled with emotion. Sometimes, when Daisy was asleep, Sasha would stare at her face for hours, as if trying to etch every detail into memory. And in the quiet of the night, when the world went still and the adrenaline faded, tears would slip down her cheeks, silent, unannounced. Not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming mix of gratitude and grief. She had lost everything that connected her to Brando. His touch, his voice, his smile, even the son they had never held, but in Daisy, she had one last miracle. A fragment of him. A heartbeat that carried both their legacies forward. And she would not, could not, let it slip away. Meanwhile, Sonny disappeared from the public eye. He retreated into the solitude of his estate, shielding himself from the media storm, from whispered judgment, from the thinly veiled questions posed by allies and enemies alike. He knew what people were saying. That he had crossed a line, that even for him, this was too far. But Sonny didn't need public approval. He never had. The law might never sanction what he had done. The town might debate the morality of his actions for years. But in his heart, there was no uncertainty. He had looked into the eyes of a woman holding an innocent child hostage and had made the only choice that ensured that child's survival. In that moment, he had not been a mob boss or a businessman. He had been an uncle. A protector. A man who refused to lose another child to madness. In the days that stretched endlessly forward, Sonny and Sasha didn't speak. They didn't need to. There was no need for apologies or justifications. The act had already been written in blood and silence. Each carried the weight of it in different ways, Sasha with quiet sorrow and fierce resolve, Sonny with stoic detachment and a lingering shadow in his eyes. Neither of them would ever be quite the same. But they both understood that some lines, once crossed, change everything, not because you regret them, but because you recognize that life afterward demands something new from you. For Sasha, that meant transformation. She had spent too long in the role of the victim, the grieving widow, the recovering addict, the woman left behind by fate again and again. But with Gladys gone, with the threat eliminated by the very hands of someone she once feared, a new Sasha began to emerge. One forged not by pain, but by fierce, unrelenting love. Daisy wasn't just her daughter anymore. She was her reason. Her war cry. Her redemption. In the softness of her baby's skin and the light of her innocent eyes, Sasha found the steel she needed to rise, not for herself, but for the life she had sworn to protect. She began to change quietly, gradually. No more sleepless nights tormented by what-ifs. No more letting the past hold her hostage. She enrolled in self-defense classes, met with security experts, reinforced every door and window in her home. She even revisited her finances and legal documents, ensuring that Daisy would be protected no matter what came next. Not because she feared another Gladys, but because she knew darkness never truly disappeared in Port Charles, it simply changed its face. And still, in the stillness of midnight, Sasha would often hold Daisy against her heart and whisper promises. That she would always be there. That she would never allow anyone to hurt her again. That her story wouldn't end in tragedy. That no matter what shadows tried to reclaim them, Sasha would be the shield that stood between Daisy and the chaos of the world. Gladys's death wasn't the end. It was the ignition point. The moment the tides turned. The moment Sasha stopped being the woman who suffered, and started becoming the woman who fought. And somewhere, perhaps in the quietest corner of his estate, Sonny Corinthos knew it too. He knew he hadn't just saved a child that night, he had awakened a mother's fury. A sacred, holy fire that no enemy would ever extinguish again. And that fire had a name. Daisy. And so, beneath the shadows of a town that never forgets and rarely forgives, a new chapter quietly took shape, not with triumph or celebration, but with a mother's tear-stained strength and a protector's silent burden. Port Charles would move on, as it always did, spinning its endless web of secrets and scars. But for Sasha, time no longer revolved around loss. It moved forward with every breath Daisy took, with every heartbeat that reminded her she still had something worth living for. And for Sonny, though the world may have judged his methods, one undeniable truth remained: a child was alive because he had chosen action over hesitation. In a world where pain was currency and betrayal lingered like fog, they had carved out something rare: survival. Not without consequence, not without cost, but with a kind of raw, undeniable purpose. From the ashes of terror and betrayal, Sasha emerged not shattered, but sharpened. No longer the victim of others' choices, she became the author of her own future, a mother not just defined by grief, but by unrelenting resolve. And Sonny, ever the quiet sentinel, faded once more into the background, knowing his role in this story was not to be remembered, but to be right. The echoes of that night would never fully fade. The gunshot. The cries. The silence. But in the end, only one sound mattered: the steady, growing laughter of a little girl named Daisy, safe in the arms of a mother who had chosen to fight back, and a family that had, in its own fractured way, chosen to protect her. From here on, the war wasn't over, but the rules had changed. And this time, Sasha was ready.